The rain battered the windows of my Seattle apartment, a relentless drumbeat that mirrored the chaos in my chest. I stood frozen, staring at the couch where Ethan sprawled, his broad frame tangled in a too-small blanket, one arm flung over the edge like he owned the place. Last night, he'd shown up at my door, soaked to the bone, his hazel eyes wild with something I couldn't name, grief, maybe, or desperation, and I hadn't asked questions. I'm Jasper Klein, 25, a graphic designer who spent half my life dodging feelings I shouldn't have. Ethan Caldwell, my best friend since we were 14, is the kind of guy who walks into a room and makes everyone feel like they're home. He's straight, or so he's always said, built like a linebacker with a crooked smile that could charm a brick wall. We grew up in Boise, Idaho, sneaking beers behind his dad's garage and promising we'd conquer the world together. I moved to Seattle for work. He stayed behind, chasing a carpentry apprenticeship and a string of girlfriends who never stuck. But now, here he was, crashing on my couch after a cryptic text. Need a place to crash. Life's a mess. The apartment smelled of damp wool and the coffee I'd brewed to steady my nerves. Ethan stirred, his low groan cutting through the rain's rhythm. I turned away, busying myself with dishes, but my eyes kept darting back to him. His blonde hair stuck to his forehead, and his t-shirt clung to his chest, still damp from last night's storm. I'd always been careful, keeping my feelings locked in a box labeled, "Don't ruin this." I'm gay, out since 17, and Ethan had been cool about it, hugged me when I told him, said it didn't change a thing. But it changed everything for me. Jasp. His voice, rough with sleep, hit me like a punch. I dropped a mug into the sink, the clatter too loud in the quiet room. You okay, man? Yeah. I lied, turning to face him. He sat up, rubbing his eyes, the blanket pooling around his waist. His gaze was too sharp, like he could see the thoughts I was trying to bury. You didn't have to let me crash here, he said, voice softer now. I know it's weird. It's not weird. It was a lie and we both knew it. The air felt thick, like the moment before a storm breaks. He stood, stretching, his shirt riding up to reveal a sliver of tan skin. I looked away, my heart hammering. We spent the morning avoiding the elephant in the room. Ethan didn't say why he'd left Boise, why he'd driven 500 miles in a downpour to show up at my door. I didn't ask. Instead, we talked about nothing, old high school pranks, the Seahawks' latest game, the vinyl records I'd been collecting. By noon, the rain had eased, and Ethan suggested we grab food at Pike Place Market. Like old times, he said, flashing that grin that made my resolve wobble. The market was alive with color and noise, vendors shouting, fish flying, the briny scent of the Puget Sound mingling with roasted coffee. Ethan seemed lighter here, his shoulders relaxing as we wandered past stalls. He bought us both clam chowder, insisting on paying, and we sat on a bench overlooking the water, bowls steaming in our hands. The city sparkled under a rare break in the clouds, and for a moment, it felt like we were kids again, untouchable. You ever miss Boise? He asked, staring at the horizon. Sometimes, I said. You? He didn't answer right away. His jaw tightened, and he stirred his chowder like it held the secrets of the universe. I messed up, Jasp, he said finally. So quiet I almost missed it. Back home. Screwed things up bad. I waited, my spoon hovering. Ethan wasn't the type to spill his guts. He'd always been the strong one, the guy who fixed things, broken chairs, broken plans, broken hearts. But now he looked lost, like a ship cut loose from its anchor. What happened? I asked, bracing myself. He shook his head, a bitter laugh escaping. Not yet. I can't. Not yet. I wanted to push, to demand answers, but the raw edge in his voice stopped me. Instead, I bumped his shoulder with mine, a silent "I'm here." He glanced at me, his eyes catching the light, and for a second, I thought he might say something real. But he just smiled, small and sad, and went back to his chowder. That night, back at the apartment, Ethan insisted on cooking. He raided my fridge, pulling out half a bell pepper and some questionable chicken, muttering about making something edible. I sat on the counter, watching him chop with a precision that reminded me of his carpentry work. Deliberate, steady. The kitchen filled with the sizzle of garlic and the warmth of his laugh as he teased me about my lack of spices. "You're hopeless, Klein," he said, tossing a piece of pepper at me. I caught it, grinning despite myself. "Shut up, you're the one who thinks salt is a personality trait." He laughed, and it felt like sunlight breaking through clouds. We ate on the couch, plates balanced on our knees, a Fleetwood Mac record spinning softly in the background. The room was warm, the kind of cozy that makes you forget the world outside. Ethan was halfway through a story about a botched cabinet job when he paused, his fork hovering. "Jasp," he said, his voice different now, quieter. "Thanks for this. For letting me in." I shrugged, my throat tight. "You'd do the same." He looked at me then, really looked, and the air shifted. His hand rested on the couch between us, inches from mine, and I swear I felt the heat of it. My pulse raced and I hated myself for it. He was straight. He was my best friend. This was a line I couldn't cross. But then he leaned closer, just a fraction, and my heart stopped. "You ever think about, what if things were different?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. I froze, my mind screaming to shut this down, to laugh it off. But his eyes held mine, searching, and I couldn't look away. The record skipped, the needle scratching softly, and the world narrowed to the space between us. "What do you mean?" I managed, my voice hoarse. He opened his mouth, then closed it, shaking his head. "Nothing. Forget it." But it wasn't nothing. I could feel it, heavy and unspoken, hanging in the air like the rain outside. And as we sat there, the couch creaking under our weight, I wondered if I'd just glimpsed something I'd spent years trying not to see. The next morning, I woke to the smell of bacon and the clatter of pans. Ethan was in the kitchen, shirtless, his hair a mess, flipping strips in a skillet like he'd lived here forever. The sight of him, broad shoulders, easy grin, hit me like a freight train. I'd spent years building walls around my feelings, but they were crumbling, and I wasn't sure I could stop it. "Morning, sunshine," he called, not looking up. "You got any eggs that aren't expired?" I mumbled something incoherent, rubbing sleep from my eyes, and shuffled to the fridge. We moved around each other like we'd done this 1,000 times, but every brush of his arm against mine felt like a spark. I needed to get a grip. Over breakfast, Ethan was quieter than usual, his usual banter replaced by long sips of coffee and glances out the window. The rain had stopped, leaving Seattle draped in a misty gray. I wanted to ask about last night, about that question he dangled then snatched away, but the words stuck in my throat. "Let's get out of here," he said suddenly, pushing his plate away. "I need air." We ended up at Alki Beach, the wind sharp and salty, the Olympic Mountains looming across the water. Ethan walked ahead, hands in his pockets, his boots sinking into the damp sand. I followed, watching the way his shoulders hunched against the cold. He looked like a man carrying a weight he couldn't put down. "You gonna tell me what's going on?" I asked, catching up. The wind swallowed my words, but he heard. He stopped, staring at the waves. "I got fired," he said finally. "Boss caught me drinking on the job. Said I was a liability." I blinked, the confession hitting hard. Ethan wasn't a saint, but he'd always been steady, the guy who held it together. Why didn't you tell me? Didn't want you to look at me like that, he said, glancing over. His eyes were raw, unguarded. Like I'm some screw-up. You're not, I said too quickly. You're Ethan. He laughed, but it was hollow. Yeah, well, Ethan's not doing so hot. We walked in silence after that, the crash of waves filling the space between us. I wanted to fix it, to say the right thing, but all I could think about was how close he was, how easy it would be to reach out. I didn't. Back at the apartment, Ethan seemed determined to keep things light. He found my old Nintendo 64, and we spent hours playing Mario Kart, trash-talking like we were 15 again. But every time he laughed, every time his knee bumped mine, I felt that pull, that dangerous hope I'd buried for years. That night, we ordered pizza and cracked open a six-pack. The living room was a mess. Empty cans, greasy boxes, the TV glowing with some terrible action movie Ethan had picked. He was sprawled on the couch, one arm behind his head, and I was on the floor, leaning against the coffee table. The air was warm, lazy, but there was a current underneath, like a storm brewing. You ever feel like you're running out of time? He asked out of nowhere, his voice cutting through the movie's gunfire. I turned, meeting his gaze. He wasn't smiling now. All the time, I said. You? He nodded, his eyes distant. I thought I'd have it figured out by now. Job, life, all of it. But I'm 25, and I'm nowhere. You're here, I said, the words slipping out before I could stop them. That's somewhere. His lips twitched, not quite a smile. He sat up, leaning forward, his elbows on his knees. You're too good to me, Jasp, he said, his voice low. Always have been. My heart thudded, loud enough I was sure he could hear it. I wanted to say something, anything, but my mouth was dry. His hand moved, resting on the couch near mine, and I swear the room tilted. I could feel the heat of his fingers, the weight of his gaze. And then, like a coward, I broke the moment. Another beer? I asked, standing too fast. He blinked, the spell broken. Yeah, sure. I cursed myself as I grabbed 2 cans from the fridge. I was reading too much into him. Ethan was hurting, lost, and I was his safe place to land. That's all this was. But when I handed him the beer, his fingers brushed mine, lingering a second too long, and my resolve cracked a little more. The next day, I had to work, leaving Ethan alone in the apartment. My design firm was downtown, a sleek office with too much glass and not enough soul. I spent the day sketching logos, but my mind was back home, wondering what Ethan was doing, what he wasn't saying. By the time I got back, the apartment was spotless. Dishes done, floor swept, even the couch cushions fluffed. Ethan was at the kitchen table, sanding a small wooden box, his hands steady and sure. You didn't have to clean, I said, dropping my bag. He shrugged, not looking up. Felt like I should earn my keep. The box was beautiful, intricate swirls carved into the lid. What's this for? I asked, touching the smooth wood. You, he said simply, and my heart stopped. Figured you could use something nice. I stared at him, my throat tight. Ethan, you don't have to. I want to. He cut in, his eyes meeting mine. There was something there, something I couldn't name, and it scared me as much as it thrilled me. I wanted to ask what he meant, what this meant, but the words wouldn't come. Instead, we fell back into our rhythm, dinner, music, easy banter. But every glance, every laugh, felt charged, like we were dancing around something neither of us could name. And as the night wore on, I couldn't shake the feeling that we were running out of time to figure it out. The third day, Ethan woke up different. There was a restlessness in him, a crackle of energy that hadn't been there before. He was already dressed when I stumbled out of my room, his boots laced, his jacket slung over a chair. "Let's do something stupid," he said, grinning like he was 16 again. "Stupid how?" I asked, wary but already smiling. He dragged me to a dive bar in Capitol Hill, the kind of place with sticky floors and a jukebox that only played 80s hits. We shot pool, drank cheap beer, and laughed too loud, drawing glares from the regulars. Ethan was magnetic, his energy pulling me in, and for a few hours, I forgot to be careful. I forgot to guard my heart. But as the night wore on, he got quiet again. We were walking back to the apartment, the city alive with neon and noise, when he stopped under a streetlight. "I need to tell you something," he said, his voice rough. My stomach dropped. "Okay." He ran a hand through his hair, pacing a small circle. "Back in Boise, it wasn't just the job. I was with someone, Lauren. Thought she was the one, you know? But she," he trailed off, his jaw tight, "she cheated. Said I wasn't enough." I felt a surge of anger, not at him but at her, at the world for breaking him like this. "She's wrong," I said fiercely. "You're more than enough." He looked at me, his eyes searching mine, and for a moment, I thought he might say something that would change everything. But he just nodded, shoving his hands in his pockets. "Thanks, Jasp." We didn't talk about it again, but the confession hung between us, heavy and unresolved. Back at the apartment, Ethan was quieter, his usual bravado gone. I put on a record, Tom Petty, because it was his favorite, and we sat on the couch, the music filling the silence. "I don't know who I am anymore," he said suddenly, his voice barely audible over the guitar. "I thought I had it all figured out, but I don't." I turned to him, my heart aching. "You don't have to have it figured out. Not with me." His eyes met mine, and there it was again, that pull, that unspoken thing that made my chest tight. He leaned closer, his shoulder brushing mine, and I held my breath. "You make it easy," he said softly. "Being here, with you." I wanted to say something, to tell him how much he meant to me, how much he'd always meant. But fear stopped me, the same fear that had kept me silent for years. Instead, I bumped his shoulder, forcing a smile. "Good, 'cause you're stuck with me." He laughed, but it didn't reach his eyes. And when he leaned back, his hand stayed close to mine, close enough that I could feel the warmth of it, close enough that I wondered what it would be like to close the gap. The next day, Ethan insisted on helping with my work. I had a deadline for a client's branding package, and he sat at the kitchen table, sketching ideas on scrap paper while I worked on my laptop. His drawings were rough but thoughtful, and I caught myself watching him more than my screen. His focus, the way his brow furrowed, the way his hands moved, it was all too much. "You're staring," he said, not looking up. "Am not." I lied, my face hot. He grinned, tossing a pencil at me. "Liar." We worked until midnight, the apartment filled with the hum of creativity and the occasional laugh. Felt right, like we were building something together, even if it was just a logo. But as the night wore on, I could feel the weight of his gaze, the way he lingered when our hands brushed over the sketches. "You're good at this," he said, nodding at my screen. "Always knew you'd be." "You're not so bad yourself," I said, gesturing to his sketches. "Maybe you should stick around. Be my unpaid intern." He laughed, but there was something wistful in it. Maybe I should. The words hung there, heavy with possibility. I wanted to ask what he meant, if he was serious, but I didn't. Instead, we cleaned up, the silence comfortable but charged. And when he went to sleep on the couch, I lay awake in my room, wondering how much longer I could keep pretending this was just friendship. The next morning, I found him staring at the wooden box he'd made, his fingers tracing the carvings. "You like it?" he asked, catching me watching. "It's perfect," I said, meaning it, You didn't have to make me anything. I wanted to, he said again, and the way he looked at me made my heart race. You deserve something real. I didn't know what to say, so I didn't say anything. But as we went about our day, coffee runs, walks through the city, quiet moments in the apartment, I couldn't shake the feeling that we were on the edge of something, teetering between what was and what could be. By the 5th day, the apartment felt smaller, like the walls were closing in on us. Ethan's presence was everywhere. His boots by the door, his jacket on the chair, his laugh in the air. I was drowning in him, and I didn't want to come up for air. We spent the day exploring Fremont, wandering past quirky art installations and quirky cafes. Ethan was lighter, joking about the giant troll sculpture under the bridge, but I could still see the shadows in his eyes. Whatever had brought him here, it wasn't gone. Not yet. That night, we ended up at a rooftop bar, the city sprawling below us like a sea of lights. Ethan leaned against the railing, a beer in his hand, his profile sharp against the skyline. I stood beside him, close enough to feel the heat of his arm, and for once, I didn't pull away. You ever think about starting over? He asked, his voice low, like leaving everything behind and just going? All the time, I said, my eyes on the city. But it's not that easy. He turned to me, his gaze intense. What if it was? What if you had someone to go with? My breath caught. Like who? He didn't answer, just looked at me, and the world seemed to stop. The noise of the bar faded. The city lights blurred, and all I could see was him. His hand moved, brushing mine, and this time, neither of us pulled away. Jasp, he said, his voice rough. I've been thinking a lot. About you. About us. My heart was a drum in my chest, loud and insistent. What about us? He stepped closer, so close I could feel his breath. I don't know what I'm doing, he admitted, his eyes searching mine. But when I'm with you, it's the only time I feel like I'm not falling apart. I couldn't speak, couldn't move. All the years of wanting, of hiding, crashed over me like a wave. And then, before I could think, he leaned in, his lips brushing mine, tentative, like he was testing the waters. The kiss was soft, fleeting, but it set my world on fire. I pulled back, my mind reeling, searching his face for answers. Ethan, you're straight. He laughed, a shaky, broken sound. Yeah, I thought so too. But then I look at you, and I don't know anymore. I wanted to kiss him again, to pull him close and never let go, but fear stopped me. What does this mean? I asked, my voice barely a whisper. I don't know, he said, his hands still on mine, but I want to find out. We didn't kiss again that night. We went back to the apartment, the air between us electric, fragile. I couldn't sleep, my mind replaying that moment, his words, the feel of his lips. Ethan was on the couch, his breathing steady, but I knew he was awake too. I could feel it. The next day, we were careful, tiptoeing around what had happened. We went to a bookstore, flipping through novels and comics, pretending everything was normal. But every glance, every accidental touch, was a reminder of the line we'd crossed. That night, we sat on the couch, a movie playing that neither of us was watching. Ethan's hand rested on the cushion, inches from mine, and I couldn't take it anymore. I reached out, my fingers brushing his, and he didn't pull away. Jasp, he said, his voice low. I'm scared. Me too, I admitted, my heart pounding. But I've wanted this for so long. He turned to me, his eyes wide, vulnerable. How long? Years, I said, the truth spilling out. Since we were kids. He exhaled, like the weight of my words had knocked the air from him. And then he was moving, closing the distance, his lips finding mine again. This time, The kiss was deeper, desperate, like we were making up for lost time. His hands were in my hair, mine on his chest, and for the first time, I let myself believe this could be real. When we pulled apart, breathless, he rested his forehead against mine. "I don't know what I'm doing," he whispered, "but I know I don't want to lose you." "You won't," I said, my voice fierce. "Not ever." We stayed like that, tangled together, the world outside forgotten. And for the first time in years, I felt like I was exactly where I was meant to be. The next week was a blur of moments. Stolen kisses, quiet confessions, the slow unraveling of everything we'd been. Ethan didn't have answers, and neither did I, but we were figuring it out together. He started looking for work in Seattle, talking about staying, about building something new. And for the first time, I let myself hope. But the past has a way of catching up. One morning, Ethan's phone buzzed with a call from Boise. It was his sister, Claire, her voice sharp through the speaker. "You need to come home," she said. "Dad's sick. It's bad." Ethan's face went pale, and I felt the ground shift beneath us. He didn't talk much after the call, just packed a bag and booked a bus ticket. "I'll be back," he said, his hand on my cheek. "This isn't over." I nodded, but fear gnawed at me. What if Boise pulled him back? What if this us was just a moment, a fleeting escape from his real life? He left that afternoon, and the apartment felt empty without him. I kept busy, throwing myself into work, but every quiet moment brought his face to mind. The way he'd looked at me, the way he'd held me. I found the wooden box on my nightstand, the carvings intricate and warm under my fingers, and it anchored me. Days turned into weeks, and Ethan's texts were sporadic but steady. "Dad's stable," he'd write. "Miss you." I clung to those words, but doubt crept in. What if he changed his mind? What if he went back to being the straight guy who didn't see me that way? Then, one rainy evening, there was a knock at my door. I opened it, and there he was, Ethan, soaked and tired, but smiling that crooked smile. "Told you I'd be back," he said, stepping inside. I didn't let him say anything else. I kissed him, hard and sure, and he kissed me back, his hands pulling me close. When we finally pulled apart, he laughed, his eyes bright. "I'm staying," he said, "for good." We talked all night about his dad, about Boise, about us. He told me he'd spent years running from himself, from feelings he didn't understand until he was here, with me. "You're home, Jasp," he said, his voice steady. "You always have been." It wasn't perfect. There were still questions, fears, a world that wouldn't always understand. But as we sat on the couch, his arm around me, I knew we'd face it together. Love doesn't fix everything, but it gives you a reason to try. And for us, that was enough.